Printing is always nerve-wracking. Every print I make represents hours of learning, listening, watching, and the forming of relationships. It represents a responsibility to the being whose story I now have an image of. It also represents countless hours of work, of Western-styled research, and an Eastern commitment to beauty. It represents every component of my camera, computer, printer, of the buildings that house the production facilities, the people who operate them, the wildlife that has been displaced, and also the great beings who walked this world, died, and are now called gas. The list could go on, but I think it's time to explain who I am. I am Artemis Kane, currently a wildlife photographer in London, England, but originally a child running about on the Treaty 1 territory of what is currently called Canada. My pronouns are they, them, and while I was raised being told I'm a Euromutt, my grandmother's passing opened the door to the knowledge that I'm also Métis, and I have reconnected to who I and my people are. I currently identify as a Métis Two-Spirit with European heritage, though these are human terms, and I personally feel best when I'm with our non-human king, which brings us back to the point, biodiversity and worldviews. First, we need a quick lesson on how cameras work. Camera lenses, alongside the sensor in the camera body, are what let you see. There are many numbers attached to lenses, but today I don't plan on getting into that. Today I merely plan to start with a macro lens, which is what lets us see our smallest members of society. Macro lenses are great for getting really, really close to beings. They create the photos where you can feel the texture of what you're looking at, where you get that almost microscopic feeling sometimes as the tiniest being is brought to the forefront of a photo. The macro lens allows us to see what we cannot see with our own eyes. It allows us to admire the beauty of the way a fly can be so colorful, with their metallic greens and blues, the way a spider looks out from under a ledge. The spider that is 3 millimeters small, accidentally squishable by our human standards, is suddenly brought to us in a way we can appreciate. We can see their eyes as they gaze out, and we can wonder what they're thinking of, what they're dreaming of. It allows us to appreciate the story of a being that we may not be able to see without paying very, very close attention. But macro lenses also have a great downfall. They're too specific, too siloed even. They tend to have a very shallow depth of field, which means that only a small portion of what is there can be seen as in focus. One can easily miss out on the greater picture when one delves into cold objective measures such as magnification factors or statistical significance, or even just population numbers. The high technical demands placed on macro photography, such as the need for a great amount of light, means that macro photography is often done in a lab or studio with accompanying light sources that can be controlled. These places are removed from the living world, and as such, the subjects are usually no longer living. Having a non-moving subject means that the photographer can take their time in setting up where to focus, how to light them to show you the finest detail, and thus can deliver to you a technically perfect photograph. But, for me, while this photograph can show me how beautiful a being was, it cannot truly tell me the story of that tiny member of society. We ourselves are not cold beings. We all come to our tasks with a story. Macro lenses can be used to bring such tiny but profound stories to life, but often they are held in sterile environments and the story is no longer there. I find this to be parallel to the notion of objectivity. Western science depends on an illusion of objectivity, the idea that you can remove yourself when you approach science. Indigenous scholars know objectivity to be a lie, however. Similar to how you can tell that a bug pinned to a board is no longer alive, so too can you tell that, without feeling, motivation, or story, science cannot happen. We all have a bigger picture that motivates us, and so, onto the wide-angle lens. The wide-angle lens gives us a view that is wider than what our own eyes give. This is not to say that it necessarily sees more than our peripheral vision, that is the domain of ultra-wide-angle lenses, just that it has, in focus, a larger area than our central vision allows. Yet it feels the realist, at least to me. Given that we're able to move our eyes with relative ease, we perceive our vision as having a wider focus than it does. Ironically, our own vision is a blind spot of ours, something we cannot see and rarely contemplate. Most of us rarely question what we see, how we see it, or if there is another way to see, and yet there are many ways of knowing, of seeing this world that we live in. I find my wide-angle lens to be the easiest for me to use, just as living in my worldview without contemplating other worldviews is easy. This lens is light and doesn't require much attention, yet it doesn't tell a full story. My goal in photography is to bring a story of an individual to those who view my work. I want to show them what I see, and when I see a landscape, my mind focuses on those beings that form the bigger picture. So, for my worldview to come to you, I must change my lens and move on to the telephoto. Everything we do in our life comes with responsibilities, and one of my responsibilities in capturing the story of a living being is to not harm them. Telephoto lenses allow you to stay a respectful distance while still getting that shot that makes you feel like you are right there. They allow you to feel the intimacy of a moment, and this is what I seek to find with my photography, the moments when our non-human kin are just being. But with distance comes some questions of consent. If I am far enough away and do not move, it is possible the subject I am looking at doesn't realize I am there. If this is the case, am I stealing their story? Determining the difference between what is comfortable acceptance of my existence on one end of the lens and what is stealing on the other is not an easy task. This takes time, listening, watching, and being willing to admit I was wrong. These are all important parts of both Western and Indigenous research methods. The difference for me comes in on where and how we are willing to listen, where and when we are willing to admit we are wrong. It is impossible to move through the world without having an impact, and, as Jane Goodall says, it is up to you and I to decide what kind of impact you and I will have. What we do makes a difference, and as I stand back with my lens, I try to find the very thin line between being not noticed and being understood as an obvious threat. I try to find the space where my non-human relation knows I am there, but is willing to continue their day, where they are willing and able to tell me their story. I often fail at this, but as with everything, learning happens, and I thank each being for their patience, or lack thereof, as I stumble through this task of trying to turn an entire life into a single fraction of a second. Starting a wildlife photography business at the beginning of a pandemic was probably not the smartest business decision I could have made, but taking the time to understand the technology I hold will benefit me when it is time to head out into the field. The technical aspects of a lens, of a camera, are only one half of its story. Even something inanimate such as a camera comes with emotions as we carry it, learn from it, and ultimately prepare to move past it. And with that, I think it's time to come to a close with some final thoughts. One worldview may worry over whether the porcupine has enough different trees nearby to keep his taste buds happy, and another may worry about the threat of monocultures on biodiversity. Both sides are worried about the same thing, but how we approach these issues is different. One is cold and calculating, though passion flames why the research is being done. Another is close and personal, tempered by millennia of respectful cohabitation and observation. My lens and camera body that holds it is cold, hard, made of metal, plastic, and glass. The sensor is made through technological advancements that would have been unthinkable just 20 years ago. My own mind was trained in Western systems to be cold and calculating, objective. Despite that work, though, before any educational facility got a hold of me, I was trained by the beings in my little house on the prairies. I was taught to be gentle by the robins, owls, the barn cats, and the farm dogs. I heard the coyote at night and watched the beaver groom themselves by the creek. I was raised seeing stars in an open world, and while academia may have tried to put a close to such fancies as the robin is my teacher, I came back to myself as I found my people and we claimed each other. I walk in both worlds, and at times keeping myself grounded is incredibly difficult, but the time I spend with my non-human kin reminded me that I am soft, warm, feeling. Western science gave me one lens, but the robin gave me another.